You're listening to The Field Experience, a podcast by Frontiers Travel. I'm your host, Joe Koziara. This show digs into the stories, places, and people behind some of the best outdoor sporting destinations around the world. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. This is Joe Koziara, Frontiers Travel, and I'm joined today with my colleague Tom Gilliland, who handles the Alaska program for us here at Frontiers. And today we're going to be talking with the folks at Intricate Bay Lodge and Outpost in Lake Iliamna, Alaska. So we'll be joined by Brian Harry, who's owner, operator, head pilot. Say hello, Brian.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Tom. Glad to be here.
Also joining us is Abe Blair, the GM and lead guide, and an extraordinarily talented photographer as well. Hi, Abe.
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me on the program.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm glad we were able to connect this. Abe, are you buried under 10 feet of snow out there?
No, just up the hill in Lake Tahoe. Yes, there is a lot of snow, but down here in Reno, we've got 5 or 6 inches. And I was actually on a fly fishing photo shoot in Idaho during the entire storm, so I didn't have to do any shoveling or stressing.
Oh, right on.
Good for you.
Yeah, great timing. What about you, Brian?
Yeah, down here in Bishop, we actually did get a decent storm, probably 4 or 5 inches as well, but it's all melted now in town. But I'd say 6,000 feet and above, pretty decent amount of snow. Expecting a rainstorm coming up today and tomorrow, so we'll see what happens. Maybe some flooding.
You get mudslides?
Not here, no. No mud, all sand and dirt, or sand, rock.
So, I mean, before we get into all the details, I wanted to ask you guys about just Alaska in general, which seems to, carry to this day this big mystique and appeal to anglers, hunters, outdoorsmen, climbers, skiers, whatever it might be. Alaska still holds this kind of place at the top of everyone's list. And I was wondering, if you have some insight into that or what you think it is about that area that makes it so special.
I mean, it's just, I think simply put, it's some of the most unspoiled terrain in the U.S. The ease of getting to the major hubs and then the ease of getting out into the middle of nowhere. I mean, if you fly into Anchorage and you take a 1-hour charter flight in just about any direction, you suddenly feel extremely small and get to experience just I guess what it would have felt like 100 or 200 years ago in the lower 48 in terms of just a lack of people and the wildlife outnumbers the human population by a lot. So there's just this visceral core excitement of being in such a remote, untapped resource that it's just special. I think I've got upwards of 40 trips in the last 25 years to Alaska. It's one of my favorite places in the whole world.
Yeah, I can agree completely with Abe and just touch on, I would say, like, for staff, owners, operators, whoever, who spend the season up there, you almost look back and say it was type B fun, I mean, I think that's what brings us back year after year. It's exciting. It's challenging. Sometimes it's scary. And I think for the return guest that just has to make Alaska part of their life year after year, it's the same thing, really. I mean, they're a little bit out of their comfort zone and they might be a little scared on this particular day, or maybe not scared, but cold and it's windy and there's a bear over there. It's so much more than the fishing. It's all that rush, it's the life in Alaska. I've just really never felt it anywhere else. Yeah.
I like to refer to it as the state. Many people I've seen it over the years. It gets in your blood. You don't know what to expect. You go there and it just can be so visually and emotionally impactful that for many people, it's in their blood. And once you go, you got to go again and again. And whether it's the same place or different areas, it's just a unique and special environment. It very much feels like a foreign country in a lot of ways, just with the various cultures and then just the raw wilderness and remoteness. And then to have the lodge in the middle of nowhere that has all of these creature comforts of, lake and, heat and wood burning hot tubs and hot water is the contrast is so cool to just, like Brian says, to be out in the wilderness and maybe thinking it's a type B kind of a day because it's a little bit hairy out with the weather and the animals everywhere. And then a few hours later, you're in just creature comforts of home. It's kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and it does. I mean, Joe, Tom, Abe, we're very, very much outdoorsmen. So it's not quite as much contrast, but just like think about or paint this picture, maybe a city guy from New York that just left the cubicle on the 15th floor of the Citibank building. He jumped on an airplane, and in 24 hours, he's floating down a river in the middle of nowhere in Alaska. I mean, that contrast, I mean, is extreme as it gets for people, for an experience that just is not like anything else they've ever done.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Where every aspect of the environment is going to be, quite a bit different from the day to day. Is that something I wonder that you guys, and Abe, you mentioned you've been going there for a couple decades. I know, Brian, you have a deep history up there. Is that something you guys recognized on your initial trips? So maybe the first or second time that you were there, like that sat in where you knew you were going to have a long future and a long relationship with it up there?
100%. Yeah. Even before my first trip to Alaska, fortunate to do some travel and been a few places. And after my first season in Alaska, the only thing I could think is, how can I make this a part of my life? I want to do this every year. And I just, of course, figuring it out and after one season, you'll instantly realize, if I want to make it good, I have to become a pilot. There's no roads here. Everyone flies. And then how to try and make a living at it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the first trip was just monumental, and every trip thereafter just ingrains that love for the region and the state. So when I met Brian 10 years ago and had the opportunity to kind of come out of retirement from fish guiding, it had always been a dream to guide in Alaska. And that first trip, it surpassed all of my expectations tenfold. And as Brian says, it was instantly like, wow, like, how can I do this more and more? And yeah, I went from a 2-week part-time guide 10 years ago to full-time general manager guide. And I'd like to do this for at least another 10 years.
So when you guys speak with, a couple decades of experience, even more so combined between the two of you, and you're talking to someone that's never been, maybe a client that is going to take their first trip to Alaska. I wonder, what is it that you want to convey about, the Bristol Bay region, Intricate Bay especially, and just the state in general that is really going to set it apart from any other destination?
If you want to talk just straight into the fishing, one, it's domestic, so it's easy to travel, and two, the state of Alaska has no dams and no hatchery program. So every fish we catch is as pure and wild as you're going to find anywhere in the world. And the state of Alaska realized that resource in the 70s, and they put protections in place this is why it is always talked about in the fly fishing community as an iconic must visit location. Is the quality of the fish are unique to this region only. You can go to other places all over the world and literally catch fish that were originally grown in the U.S. or overseas and have been transplanted all over the world. But Alaska rainbows are only in Alaska, and they're a special species. I consider them to be as much of a steelhead as a rainbow trout. It's one and the same. So it's a unique species to fish for.
I'll second that, because the Alaska rainbows are so different. Their mouths are bigger. I mean, there's so many different dynamics with that fish that sets it apart from a lower 48 rainbow. They can eat mice. They can eat big patterns. There's nothing I'm ever afraid to throw for trout up there.
Yeah, I often tell folks, that we hunt the trout and the trout are hunting their meals. It's not like a lower 48 environment where you have fish that are living happily, eating microscopic little insects, and maybe a size 10 would be a big meal. These fish are hunters. They need the protein. They hunt and they eat big. And that's what I think provides them with that resilience and the strength. I always have to remind folks and guests, whether it's a new guide or guest, like, very rarely does an Alaskan rainbow roll over and give you his head at the end of a fight. Like they don't stop. Once they're in the net, they're still flopping around. It's just very different than a lower 48 fish where you fight them till they're tired and then you can slide that little net underneath that fish. The laughter rainbows, I mean, it's a battle all the way to in the net. They're just a different DNA than any rainbow I've experienced all over the world.
To touch on that, one memory that really sticks in my mind, and I had to see it twice to actually believe that it was happening. This was when I was guiding full time. It wasn't a big trout, probably about a 21-inch rainbow. I watched it just downstream of me practically beach itself, at least half its body, latched on to a rotting sockeye salmon and shake his head and tear away flesh like a shark and then back himself out. And I like rubbed my eyes and took my sunglasses off. I'm like, I didn't just see that, but he came back for another bite. It just blew me away. I mean, these trout, they're predators. I mean, they are as aggressive as they come and as wild as they come.
Yeah, that a far cry from the upstream trico dry fly eaters for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, since we're talking about the rainbows, I mean, it's kind of as iconic as it is in Alaska. Sometimes it gets forgotten about. I mean, do you see people coming up specifically to target those big bows, or is it a mix with the salmon and dollies? Can we talk about the trout fishing a little bit and just that alone, like what makes it so special?
Yeah, I mean, we get guests who I would define us as a trophy trout lodge, and I'd say a lot of our guests know that, and they're looking to catch that 30-inch lifetime rainbow trout. That's, for whatever reason, that has become kind of a marker as an accomplished angler and trout fisherman, is to catch that 30-incher. And so, yeah, we get guests that are constantly, that's the goal, And from a guide perspective, I can't tell you, I'm sure Brian will agree, how many times in a single week you'll fish with the same guest. They catch the biggest fish of their life. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It just, the bar continues to rise every single day, often with different techniques, different rivers. It's just such a cool experience to share with these guests. So that, but with that said, there's a fair amount of folks who they want to bring salmon home, coming up in July and bringing a box of fresh wild sockeye salmon home. I mean, last I checked, that's like $25-$30 a pound. And I guarantee you the fish that you're bringing home from our lodge is going to be better than any $25-$30 a pound fish you're going to get at any store or market in the lower 48. So there's a tremendous value there. And as we talk about all the time, without the salmon in the region, the trout fishing would not be what it is. They're there to eat, as Brian said, to eat the carcasses of the fish, eat the eggs. Everything revolves around those salmon runs. And I think that's why it has been such an icon for so many years. The largest returning salmon run in the world, 40 to 80 million fish a year. It literally, I believe our Bristol Bay salmon fishery is like 80% of the global salmon supply. It's monumental. It's a global resource. And those trout are raised in that environment, and they feed off of those fish. They know when the salmon are going to be there, and that's their big eat of the year.
Yeah, it seems like really kind of the keystone to the whole ecosystem up there, aquatic and land animals, right?
Yeah. The bears wouldn't be there without the salmon, and we need the salmon to be up there. They decay and they rot, and they add nutrition to the soils and the rivers, and provides the bugs all the way down to like even the small sculpin, which the trout love to eat those too. And those are eating the salmon eggs and the leftover carcasses. And so, yeah, the salmon is really the linchpin of the whole network.
So I wonder, is there something else about your particular area that makes it, stand out for trout fishing? Obviously the salmon population, brings that whole, the biomass and everything in there. Is there other features, the topography or relation to certain waters that make it such a standout trout fishery?
Oh, I definitely feel that way. Like the Lake Iliamna is one of the largest lakes in the U.S. and definitely the region. And because of that, we have the largest quantity of salmon coming up the Kvichak River into Lake Iliamna compared to many of the other larger rivers in the area. And so more salmon means more trout. And so those fish come up to Kvichak River, they get into the lake, and then at that point, we've got countless watersheds. They're flowing into that lake. And so that lake just houses so many resident rainbow trout that I think that is why our area is so special. That paired with the fact that so many of these fisheries are 15-minute flights, outrageously short. Before I worked for this lodge, I had the opportunity to go to other lodges. And for a lot of these other lodges in the region, like a 30-minute flight's like the normal transit. And so it's a much longer flight. And they have their backyard fisheries and they are good, but the numbers just don't necessarily match up to what we see literally in our backyard. And that's just biggest lake in the state, most amount of salmon returning. It's just simple numbers.
And Joe, to touch on that, I would really brag on our home water a little bit, the Copper River and the Gibraltar River. From the park, when I refer to the park, Katmai Park, we're 800 feet lower, but that 800 feet makes enough of a difference that our local rivers have really good bug life, aquatic life. And the early season trout fishing is really, really good due to that aquatic or the bug life plentiful. It's sustainable for the trout to hang out, to live there, to be resident rainbows, opposed to most of the upper, like not most, like all the park rivers. I mean, those are lake run rainbows that come in to feed following food, whether it's a fry bust or salmon eggs or flesh. Where, the Copper and Gibraltar, we have resident rainbows there that are feeding on anything from mice to big stone flies to smaller dry flies to nymphs. So it extends our trout season a little bit. You'd be hard pressed to go up into the park. I mean, it could still be frozen, actually. But if it's not, the water's so cold and there's no food in there, the rainbows aren't in there. Where we're fishing our local rivers from opening day, June 8th on, and very productively.
I remember the first time you took me to the park in like late June or early July to a fishery I had fished a lot and knew well. And I was just in disbelief at how void that river was with trout at that time of the year.
Well, and I remember that year, Abe, and there 20-foot snow drifts on the banks. And
yeah. And just, like I knew that place as an August fishery and it was loaded with rainbows, but to see it without a single human and gin clear water and not a trout to be spotted or seen was unbelievable.
Yeah. On that, can you guys kind of walk through the seasonality? Like you mentioned opening day, June 8th, and just with maybe a little bit of a focus on the trout stuff, since I know that's what is going to kick things off. But when you're coming into the season on June 8th, is it down low with more of the, insects, aquatic insects and things like that? And then how does it progress throughout the season? Because I know, like you mentioned, it's going to turn into, some egg chasers or flesh eaters. And then I do want to pick your brain a little bit on the mousing too, but just on a seasonality thing, if you could start with, season opener.
Yeah. I mean, starting in June, like my guide bag is by far the most full and the heaviest of the season because I've got everything. I've got multiple fly boxes because at any point I can be throwing a size 2 Dolly Llama streamer. I could be rigging up a hopper dropper with like a stimulator or a chubby with like a pheasant tail underneath it. Or I could be running a big stonefly and a copper john or a mouse. I mean, it's like classic. Everything in the fly box works equally the same. I enjoy asking my guests, what do you want to fish with? Whereas later in the season, sometimes that's not a question. It's like, this is what we're using. You can use this color or that color. But in June, I'm fired up already to get to a couple of pieces of water on the copper with a chubby Chernobyl and a dropper behind it. It is just quintessential trout fishing those first few weeks. And it's really cool. The fish haven't seen a fly or a human in like 8 months. They're coming off the spawn in May. They're hungry and they're hungry and they haven't been pressured. So those first couple of weeks are just incredible. It is, again, what we talked about at the beginning. It epitomizes Alaska in the sense of just a remote wild trout fishery that just does not have the pressure. And then after a few weeks of classic trout fishing, I definitely find myself really loving those big, heavy streamers, fishing subsurface. And that's kind of in anticipation for the salmon run, which generally shows up in July. And at that point, many of our guests will want to focus on filling those fish boxes earlier in their week and then finish the week out with rainbow trout. And then once those salmon start to spawn late July, early August, we kind of switch over to that Alaskan beat game, which is no different than the most complicated lower 48 match the hatch dry fly fishing. It is incredible how many versions of orange and pink you need to carry as a guide to get fish to eat. They get so selective, and that's a fun challenge in itself. But for that diehard tried and true trout angler, June is the month. It's what do you want to use? Because we're gonna we can use anything in the fly box, and we have the equal opportunity of catching a 24, 26-inch rainbow.
Yeah. On that note, when people show up, because you're a lot of that stimmy with a pheasant tail, can people bring? I mean, most of the Western guys are going to have boxes full of that stuff. Are those hooks cut out for what you're doing up there? Or do you like to have, some Alaska specific 2X, 3X stout stuff? I assume the big streamers and that you can go heavy enough there to get away with it. But on a PT or something, do you need to go a little bit stouter?
When possible. I do tie up some flies personally, and I'll use a little bit stouter hook, but I have definitely had great results with a standard factory size 12 or size 14 copper jawed. And I'll tell you from a guide perspective, I'm not talking about this in the moment, but my heart is beating 150 beats a minute when that guest is battling a steelhead calibered rainbow trout on a size 14 hook. For the most part, we get them in. Every once in a while, I'll see a hook straighten out. Yeah, it is nice to have a little bit heavier hook. But as you were saying in June, having a guest from the Western U.S. bring their fly boxes, I enjoy that because it's fun to explore alternate patterns. I might be a very seasoned guide up there. The one thing I can guarantee you is that I don't know everything. And it's really fun to explore new patterns. And these fish don't seem to be too selective in that sense.
We doing 9'5" weights, 9'6" weights with 2X?
We're like 2X, 12-pound tippet, 10 and 12-pound tippet, 6 and 8 weights. I personally like trending toward the 7 or an 8 weight rod purely because, your first 8 fish might be 18 to 21 inches. And then that 9th fish, that might be a 28-inch rainbow. And suddenly a 6 weight is a much larger challenge unless you're pretty experienced with fighting big fish.
So tell us when, let's say somebody wants to come to catch some sockeye for the freezer. When does that season really kick off for you guys as far as quantity of fish and when you would start to consider booking the lodge for a sockeye trip?
Yeah. Well, I can share a funny story. Probably 10 years ago, I used to 100% say by July 1st, salmon rivers are filled with sockeye salmon, great catchable numbers. I now say at the end of the day, fish don't have calendars. It was July 4th weekend that I had a family reunion down in the Bay Area. And the whole theme, I was going to bring all the sockeye salmon, fresh sockeye salmon. Let's just say I stopped at Costco and got tenderloin. But that really wasn't the norm. I mean, by the beginning of July, we can find sockeye. If we have to, we fly down to the Kvichak and they're lined 6, 7 deep on both sides of the bank, pushing upstream. And on a normal year, our local rivers, by July 4th, outside the mouth of the Gibraltar, we can, start good catchable numbers. Yeah, last year I was doing a drop off over on the ocean and it was like June 10th and taxiing into the beach, had all this nervous water. I'm like, I'm in denial. I know what it is. Like I've done it 1,000 times where you taxi your plane and then all the sockeye, go everywhere. But I was just like in disbelief that it was that early, but they were there, and last year it was a really early run. So I'd say consistently by July 1st.
So there's a good overlap where you can still use your Western fly box and get into a bunch of sockeye. And let's say, the first couple weeks of July.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay.
most definitely.
Yeah.
And when
the
do your-
interesting thing is, once again, I'll reference the park. The park starts defrosting. So you can go up, you can fish a little bit higher elevation now and use your mouse, your leech, and pick up the fish that they've pushed into the rivers. They've followed the salmon, or they're anticipating the salmon, and they're a lot more active. The water warmed up a little bit.
So with that kind of diversity, and I know you guys have like crazy daylight hours, what's a day look like then? Are you just kind of going off of, what the clients are looking for, or do going into it like, hey, this is firing off over here and we got time to do it? Just what's the structure look like on those days?
Yeah, Joe, great question. And it's sort of, I'll just summarize like your initial question. If, someone who's never been to Alaska calls, and not what I like about our operation is we're small enough that we can customize a lot of stuff, a lot of details. And, your initial conversation with someone who's never been to Alaska is like, well, what are you looking for? And sort of like we just went through the season, Abe, he touched on all the fishing. I would touch a little bit more on like, well, what are the dynamics of your group? Oh, well, my wife, she'd never wanted to come to Alaska fishing with me, but she saw your fancy, nice lodge and your hot tub and your hors d'oeuvre and your drinks. And now she wants to come. I'm like, all right, how hardy is your wife? Like, does she want, because talking June, we're talking 24 hours of daylight. July, probably our nicest, weather, temps and stuff. Do you want to wow her with just some fishing, or do you want her to see a lot of wildlife too? So it's just a lot more than the fishing. And I'm just trying to match the guest needs with the opportunities that we can provide. And I mean, Alaska, like day to day, week to week, month to month, it's so different. So
You mentioned the wildlife thing. Talk to me. And I think everyone knows, the bears are kind of the standout. I mean, when you're out and about throughout the week, what are some other examples that people might have a chance to see, either from the plane or from the river?
And moose is definitely a popular one. We'll see those both from the plane and via the raft in the spring and fall quite a bit. The Copper River's got a really healthy population of golden eagles and owls, which is really fun. Lots of waterfowl. I've seen lynx and bobcat on the Copper River. Yeah. And then, of course, Lake Iliamna, only one of two places in the world with freshwater seal population. It's a harbor seal that adapted decades ago to the freshwater environment. And there are, I think, 300 or so estimated.
Oh, that's wild.
And the monster. Can't forget the monster.
Yeah. Are they residential? Those seals stay there throughout the winter, or do they drop
They
out?
do.
They actually have, they've got pictures of, cracks or holes in the ice where they come out and they're laying on the ice. They do actually spend the winter.
Ah, how cool.
Yeah, so it's a pretty diverse amount of wildlife. With the bear is the star of the show. We see those throughout the year, the largest quantity of them in July, August. And I did want to kind of circle back to talking about catering to guests a little bit. And Brian's heard this story a bunch because he helped facilitate it. But years ago, we had a group that was very hungry for a very particular fishery. And there was definitely what we refer to as like the honey bucket. This is where you really wanted to be. And another lodge had been in the area fishing that spot. And so we left early because it just never went dark, and had an outstanding day. But again, this was a group that was very competitive. They wanted to catch a lot of fish. And so we said, yeah, we can make that happen. How about a 5:30 floats up? Let's go fishing early. And then we got home early too. We fished till like maybe 1 o'clock. Those guys were so happy, and went back, had some hot tub time, some nap time, just reminiscing at how many massive fish they caught. So it is, as Brian was saying, being a smaller lodge, it really lets us customize the guest experience. We will recommend where we think we should be going, but if there's additional input, we're all ears, and we just want to ensure a memorable trip every day.
What are some of the packages that you do? Because I know within that customization opportunity, you have some different options when someone's coming to stay at the lodge. And, we talk a little bit about the outpost, but what are the different package options there? Are they mostly flight based?
We offer a land package, a combo, and a full flyout. So we can accommodate everything. So the land package, you're looking at fishing our 2 local rivers, the Gibraltar and the Copper most often. Then our combo package, you're going to get a couple of days on those rivers with the ability to fly to additional segments of those rivers and many other rivers. And then the full flyout is 5 different rivers plus the Copper on your departure day. So we can accommodate a pretty good scope of budget with those different packages. And then again, customizing and honing in where are the fish and what do you want to do.
And are some of those days combined with either a jet sled or a raft, or when you're doing the flyouts, is that mostly you're landing and fishing on foot? How does that work? Because I know you guys have access to both, right? You're doing some floats, doing some jet stuff. Where does that all tie in?
So we have jet boats stashed on various fisheries throughout the region, and those are just ready and waiting for us to arrive. Our general daily practice, however, is to load up the floats of the float plane with smaller rafts that we can then carry and haul around. And so we'll load up 4 guests and 2 guides into that beaver and 15-minute flight to a multitude of different rivers. And then we can pull those rafts out, assemble them, inflate them really quickly, and we'll look at a 4 to 8 mile float on many of our fisheries. And then we also have those walk and wait options. So again, it's if you want to walk and wait, we can do that 5 days a week. If you want to float exclusively, maybe you just got some new hips or knees installed. Yeah, we can do rafts every day. If you want to do jet boat, yeah, we've got those stashed around. So yeah, a common trip, you're going to be in a jet boat, you're going to be in a raft, and you're probably going to do a little walk and wade. It's all of the above, unless there is specific requests or requirements of our guests.
Gotcha. And are all of those packages available at both the Intricate Bay Lodge and at the Outpost as well?
Yes, they are.
Can folks show up? I mean, you mentioned the 7 and 8 weight stuff, which can be a little bit out of the realm for a lot of people coming from the lower 48. They may not have that equipment. So when they come up there, what are they expected to bring and provide? And conversely, what do you guys have on hand that you can provide for guests?
I think the Orvis endorsement is a really unique and awesome angle for us in the context that you just need to bring the clothes you want to travel in, eat breakfast and dinner in, and what you want to wear under your waders. We can supply the waders, the boots, the rods, reels, and all of the tackle. With that, we've all done this before. You fly anywhere in the world. It sucks. Like you're at 48, 49 pounds when you leave your house to go to that destination. And at the end of that fishing week, you've got wet, soggy wading boots. Suddenly your bag is 55 pounds and you're having to figure that out at the airport. You don't need to do that when you visit our lodge. We have the waders and the boots and all of the rods and tackle that really streamlines and makes the convenience of the trip a lot easier for those, traveling anglers. If you've got your favorite fishing rods, by all means, bring them. If you got your own waders and boots, go for it. I've seen a lot of guys, very seasoned. They'll bring their own waders because those dry out quickly overnight, but they will utilize our boots because, wet wading boots, it's not fun to fly with.
Yeah, that's the truth. Yeah. And that's the beauty of the Western stuff. And I guess you guys probably don't get as much wet wading going on up there with the insect activity going on through the summer. But yeah, shorts and chacos don't cut it.
No, the only wet wading I've ever done or seen was due to a stout bet with a good reward for doing so.
What's something everyone should bring that they don't necessarily think to bring that, it is just kind of a key element that you wish everyone would show up with, whether it's, a headlamp or bug wipes, whatever it might be.
And this kind of can go deeper, but I think for any travels, I think the number one thing you need to bring is goals and not expectations. I think showing up with goals and objectives to achieve is a lot healthier and better than showing up with expectations. It's difficult, I think, if you do a trip of this nature with the expectation of catching a 30-inch rainbow and on a mouse or this or that, versus having a goal of like, I'd really like to try to catch a 30-incher on a mouse and understand that it's fishing. And you can do many different techniques and tactics, but it is still fishing. So I think expectations would be the thing I like to not have from guests.
Yeah. It's interesting. The mouse thing seems to be blowing up right now. Are you guys seeing more interest in that up at the lodge when people show up, like everywhere? Social media videos for sure, but the Michigan guys are really chasing it now. And I know, there's that whole New Zealand element, but do you see people with an increase of interest in the mousing?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. I feel like we've always seen that, they want to catch a fish on a mouse.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the reality. I think due to the popularity, people are mousing more, but still where, fish, trout, 90% of their diet's underneath the water, not on the surface.
Sure.
So one guy's goal is to catch a fish on a mouse and the other guy just wants to catch fish. So he 10-to-1s them with a leech.
Mm-hmm.
So the other guy switches from the mouse to the leech. But if you go get your cast in and pay your dues, you will catch fish on mice. Yeah.
I remember that group of boys we had last year. The dad was kind of ho-hum about fishing, but the younger boys in their 20s, so all they wanted to do was mice. And we took them to a walk and wade river, and no exaggeration, I think they had like 40 eats on that day of walk and wading. I think they only put about 8 to hand, a lot of short takes and whatnot. But yeah, it was just like incredible fishing. And I had been there on similar times of the year before, and I always personally chose to fish a streamer. And yeah, we also got, 30 or 40 fish. We just put more of them in the net.
Yeah. Yeah. The conversions aren't great on those mouse bugs, are they?
No. Well, and so I was actually reading some interesting science about that process, and many rainbow trout, when they are eating or looking to eat a large mouse or something on the surface, they often will try to knock it out or impact it with their tail, which obviously is super exciting. But then when you try to make a hook set, there's nothing going on. And so the more I'm honing this technique, the more I'm realizing a tremendous amount of resilience is needed, in the sense of you're working that mouse nice and slow, and you're going to get an explosive grab. And you as an angler need to do nothing and wait for that fish to come back, because he's trying to stun that mouse. Because if you think about a mouse, it's little claws and everything. A trout does not want to inhale that thing alive right out of the gate. They need to knock it out. They need to incapacitate that thing before they're going to swallow it. But that's been a really interesting education and learning process I've been working on over the years.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
And the biggest rainbows, when they're, just like Abe said, when they're attacking mice, I've experienced 1, 2, 3 solid smacks, whether it's with the tail or just they're breaching these mice, and my mouth pattern's flying out of the air. But I've noticed the biggest rainbows, then once that mouse is still, they sip it down like a trico.
Oh, interesting.
Just a big open mouth and suck it down. When I was guiding full time, the technique was you set when you feel that rainbow pulling on your line, and then set the hook.
Yeah.
But
I'll never forget that.
Said, special rainbows, and little fish can have a big mouth. It's so fun to see some of these 16-inch rainbows just trying to get it in there when they can.
I'll never forget some of those mouse eats you had on that float we did last year, Brian. That was absolutely unbelievable. Just so aggressive. And yeah, like you said, I remember a couple of times the fly was 2 feet out of the water, and you somehow would make a corrective cast and put that fly right back into that micro pocket and smash big fish on. That was so fun.
Yeah. And I mean, that's reaction to me overreacting, you know, like you get excited, you set the hook, and now your mouse is back in the air. But you know, like if that trout came up to smack it, it's got to reposition itself. So if you get it back in there fast, he doesn't technically know he didn't just smack it in the air and it landed back. And then, I mean, I've always been a firm believer in, you know, find the fish first and then put something in front of it and trigger that instinct, you know, flash it by his face. He's going to smack it. He can't help himself.
What about the other species? When you're out, I assume you're running into grayling and dollies in some of your waters. Is that something that are just part of the day, or is that something that's kind of a separate target?
It could be different times of the year. In terms of certain rivers, I would say are definitely like, oh yeah, we're going to catch grayling at this time of year on this river versus other times of the year. And one thing we haven't talked about, again, not trying to over chat about June, but one of the things that's really underrated that we get to do in June is lake trout. And that's a deep water, trolling, downriggers, similar to the rainbows. They're coming off of the spawn, and we've got a lake with an outflow river that we fish, and many times we'll spend a few hours running the shoreline via the boats in 8 feet of water, catching 25, 30-inch lake trout on the fly rod. And that's a very unique species that is not available throughout the entire state. And just in those first few weeks of June, it's a phenomenal opportunity to get a lake trout to hand on a fly rod. But then, yeah, outside of that, we've got, you know, dollies. We see more of those often later in the season. Grayling are kind of intermixed, but there are certain times of the year on certain rivers that I have more confidence in catching a grayling.
And then for the salmon, once you get in, oh, sorry, Brian.
I was going to say, we don't really market it, but the northern pike fishing can be a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
I mean, pike fishing. So the bite's on or the bite's off, but when it's on, and it's not like, we don't specifically go fish for pike, but it's part of, you know, say a copper float where we land in the lake, we fish pike, and then we fish it through the slough, and then we turn it into a rainbow trout fishing day.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
I remember a couple of years ago, we had, what was his name? Jim and Karen, I think. But on that particular day, on that fog float, Karen got like a 30-inch pike in the morning and then put a 28-inch rainbow to hand, like one of the last pieces of water. And she was just like Mrs. Big Fish that day, that whole week. That particular was so cool. Like, she'd never caught a pike before, and then obviously had not caught a rainbow of that scale before. And it was just, that made her trip. She still talks about that. I still communicate with them on and off, and it was super cool. Yeah, 30-inch pike and a 28-inch rainbow all on the same day on the same rod with different tackle.
Right. That's a cool variety. What about the salmon? Like, what you have sockeye, what else you got for the salmon runs in your region? And can you talk about like when that all happens? Because I have no idea the seasonality there.
So yeah, many of the listeners may or may not have heard of the Kamishek River, but it's our coastal river that we go fish. We have 3 jet boats stashed there. And by mid-July, you know, pinks and chums start coming in. And then by August, the silvers start arriving. Probably peak run once again. The fish don't have calendars, but I'd say like mid-August is when sort of peak run silver salmon. But the pinks and chums, they're a blast. And a lot of times you can get entire, you know, schools of dollies sitting behind spawning pigs and chums, and very diverse fishery, and it's a lot of action.
Yeah, that chum fishery is by far my favorite species of salmon to target on a fly rod. It's so underrated, but so fun. Very aggressive, opportunistic in terms of eating a fly, unlike, say, a king salmon. I think the chum is like this blend of a king salmon and a silver salmon. Bigger than a silver, fight like a king, but aggressive eats like a silver salmon.
And do people, you mentioned earlier about, you know, when folks show up and they want to bring some salmon home, What's that look like? How do you go from a day out on the river? Do you have just like a freezer pack kind of situation going on at the lodge? Can people take home some of their catch?
Yeah, yeah. So we'll process the fish sometimes either in the field or back at the lodge, depending on the region, and get those into vacuum seals ASAP, put them on ice, and they're good and frozen in 36 hours or so. And we have the classic Alaskan fish box that every airline and in Alaska is accustomed to. And we'll load that box up with those guests, fish. We put their names on the Ziplocs or the freeze-dried bags, and they're on the dock waiting for departure on that final day.
So they don't have to necessarily bring their own box cooler.
No, not at
Anything
all.
like that.
No. Again, we'll take care of that. So you'll just get an additional piece of checked luggage essentially at the end of your week, and it's going to be upwards of 40 pounds of wild Alaska salmon.
Sweet. Oh, yeah. Tom, do you want to talk a little bit about the differences between the outpost and the lodge?
Yeah, if you could just kind of explain the lodging options. I know Intricate Bay is probably one of the newest lodges in Alaska. Absolutely beautiful. And could you just kind of go through what the stay at the lodge is like, meals, things of that nature?
Yeah, both lodges are very similar in the fishing program and the meals and amenities. I mean, both lodges have a wood burning hot tub. Both lodges have chefs and housekeepers. Both lodges have 5-star meals, planes, fly out packages, everything like that. I think you just touched on it though. Like Intricate Bay, a new lodge, the outpost is an older lodge. And then the size is the biggest difference. Up to 12 people at the main lodge. We take generally 6 people at the outpost, but an intact group will take up to 8. So I get a lot of guys that'll call and say, well, it's me and, 6 of my fishing buddies. And, well, we're a little bit loud and we like to stay up late and have a good time. And I'm like, I got the perfect place for you. It can be all yours. You're not going to have to worry about Bill and Betty that are the 2 86-year-old fishermen that went to bed 5 minutes after dinner. And you can hoop it up and you can have fun and you can jump in the lake at midnight if you want and warm up in the hot tub and you're not going to bother anybody. So, yeah, that's probably the biggest distinction. And, the couples, the older clientele that maybe wants to come back to the lodge at 1:00 and just sit on the deck and read a book. They might want a little bit more of nicer amenities. They're going to trend towards the main lodge, where a bunch of 47-year-olds that bring 15 cases of beer and 9 bottles of bourbon, they say, we just want a place to lay our head. We're here to fish and have fun. Well, the outpost is for you.
Good answers.
That's where we found ourselves these days, huh? 47-year-olds that just want to drink bourbon. On that note, what the inclusions? Because I know Alaska can be a little bit tricky with alcohol permits and things like that. Obviously, it's all chef-driven meals. What else is included, provided? How do guests arrive for such an event?
Yeah, so we provide just table wine and keg beer at the lodge. Any special wine, spirits, cans of beer for the river. Really nice service provided from Gold Rush Liquor. They have an order form, you fill it out. Shipping's included in the price, and they ship it to Iliamna. There's a bunch of rules and regulations, like 2-inch letters that read alcohol, the original receipt. But once it makes it to Iliamna, then we can pick it up and we put it in storage. And we ask our guests to do it at least like a month before their trip, so I can call Tom up and say, hey, I got your package, no worries. And it's also a good way for us to judge how fun the week's going to be. If 1 box shows up or 4 or 5.
I think we can start to wrap it up.
Yeah. Is there anything else you guys want to touch on for just the general lodge purposes? Some of the amenities that we can go over, but something that you might want, to stand out or want to tell people about the lodge?
I think we kind of touched base on it a little bit, but just in that sort of, 2-minute elevator pitch, I think what makes us unique and cool, and one of the reasons myself as an angler and now manager here is we're a small lodge by intent. We don't plan on making any major expansions and adding more and more rooms and cabins like everybody else in the region. And so we're able to just customize everything. We know our guests' names right out of the gate. Our guests get to sit with our entire staff and guide crew. There's a big difference being at a 10, 12 person dinner table versus a 20 person multiple dinner table dining experience and environment. And we really like that small intimacy. And I think that's really what sets us apart versus these larger growing lodges that, you're not going to, as guests, you're not going to meet everybody that's fishing there that week, which I think is a shame. I mean, everybody's up there for the same reasons. And it's just such a great place to make new friends. I can't tell you how many times I've seen guys make business deals over the course of the week, make new fishing friends, plan other trips. I've hosted previous guests that didn't know each other. They meet in Alaska, and then lo and behold, we find ourselves in South America on a joint trip together. It's what we offer that you're not going to find at other lodges. So I think that's just kind of our standout, something I really like to reiterate to folks.
And I think if I could touch on that, long time ago when I first got into this business, I could admit I thought I would have more fun, but it is a job. I think I'd say through the evolution of maybe I getting a little better at my job, and there was some adversity at the beginning that we had to overcome. But I'd say, especially with the addition of Abe and rest of my veteran staff, I've been having a lot more fun these last 5-6 years. And that's what it's all about. And I think our guests really feel that, like we pick them up in Ilion, we fly them across the lodge, and there's 8, 10 happy employees on the dock greeting you. And it's not fake, it's real. My whole staff, they're amazing. They're good people. There's not an ounce of ego. In the past, there's been some ego. There's just none of that anymore. And the vibe around camp is always positive. Everyone's having fun now.
That's all for this episode of The Field Experience. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this show, give us a follow, and we'd love it if you shared it with a friend. Also, check out frontierstravel.com, where you can learn more about this episode. This is your host, Joe Koziara, signing off.